Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Slay, reading 370. We are in week 13. I'd like to share my screen to get us started talking about our work for really the remainder of the course. We only really have a couple more things to do. One more blog post, which we will talk about next week, and the lesson planning, which we are going to talk about this week. So lesson planning now is the fourth part of the PBA that you've been hearing about in increments throughout the semester. So this week you are going to write a lesson plan. So I'm going to take you through a review of a lot of the content that we've talked about so that you can kind of put this all together and hopefully make sense out of it. I'll show you a sample of a lesson plan and then show you the process that you're going to go through to complete this assignment. So let me start right here in week 13. I'm going to open this link right here and it says lesson planning for writing workshop. Let me see if I can make this bigger and whoops, it should say fall. So anyway, I will change the title of that. I just thought I changed it, but I must have forgotten to edit it in D2L. So let's start here with this concept of the reading workshop. The reading workshop is a workshop model, so is the writing workshop. It's an approach. Think of a workshop as an approach. I want you to think about a workshop as something where you learn as an apprentice under the guidance of someone else how to do something, in this case, learning how to read or learning how to write. And this is an approach that you have read extensively in the guided reading book, as well as, where did it go? In the writing workshop book. And it has a certain format to it. It's very structured, and yet it's open-ended in that students are working through things at their own pace. Here's a couple of models to help you get your head wrapped around it. Number one, it's a process where there's a mini lesson. Remember, we have talked about mini lessons. This is, you're going to get a right one. Here's a mini lesson that was described in the book as well. So during the mini lesson, the teacher models what's going to be expected, whether it's in a reading strategy or an approach to reading various different words, or whether it's modeling how to write or writer's craft. Last week, I modeled how to do that with Saturdays and Tea Cakes. In writing, we always use a mentor text. In the mini lesson, the students are usually listening, and then they turn and talk in order to give feedback and do a little bit of guided work. Then the students spend about 30 minutes doing independent reading, buddy reading, reading with the teacher, maybe book clubs, and then they share something from the workshop environment, and it starts again the next day. So it can be anywhere from an hour, 45 minutes, longer. My reading and writing workshops were integrated when I taught school, and they usually ran about 90 minutes long. Jan Richardson uses this process in her reading workshops of deciding what needs to be taught. It's a very focused mini lesson. She guides the students through that process during this work time, usually in small groups. This is where you have your buddy or guided reading with the teacher part. And then she assesses what they have done and starts that process all over again. So in a balanced literacy workshop, you have this whole model going on here where you have independent reading and independent writing. They go tandem, they complement each other, because we read to gather information. We read for enjoyment. We read to learn how to become better readers. We read to study the mentors and find out how other people write and what their craft is, where we can then build some reading and writing muscle. We have quick writes, we have read alouds, we have all kinds of little mini lessons going on here, which lead into something very specific related to the standards, where you're trying to learn how to do a specific skill. And that's where the mini lesson is modeled through mentor text, through think alouds, through close reading, or annotating a text, or maybe literature discussions. And then you move into a writing craft lesson. So these are almost like three different types of lessons: writing craft lesson, a reading craft lesson, or just writing to get you inspired and get the process going. So in the writing craft lessons, usually these are done in a writing notebook. Again, think alouds and guided writing are very much a part of that process. This is also where you would put the category of shared writing. We have talked a little bit about shared writing, and it's been part of that subtext to the PBA. Shared writing is just an approach. Shared writing is just a way for the teacher to share the writing experience with students because they're still learning how to write. So the teacher is doing quite a bit of modeling. Nevertheless, it is about teaching writing. Then students move into an independent writing time. After they write on their own for a little bit, maybe there's going to be some feedback coming along through peer conferencing, teacher conferencing, one-on-one conferencing. There's going to be a little bit of reflection from the student, maybe with the teacher or maybe alone, depending on how sophisticated the student is. Some self-assessment, maybe setting goals of what needs to happen next in their writing. And then you publish for authentic audiences. And the cycle just keeps on going over and over and over. So balanced literacy is about choice and voice, time to write every day. The teacher writes with the students. This is part of that shared writing experience. Skills and crafts mini lessons where you teach specific skills, like maybe it's punctuation, maybe it's how to use metaphor, maybe how to use more descriptive writing, maybe how to bring voice into the writing piece. And we're going to talk a little bit about that soon when we talk about the right traits. And that'll be part of today's discussion. It involves the conferring because that's the most powerful teachable moment when you're working one-on-one with students. And we've covered all of these little pieces throughout the course. It's a very much a focused time of study. It's not an open-ended study where it's a free-for-all. It's focused and it's guided. And yet you give students time to write because that's the thing that we often forget is that we need time to be able to create. There's rituals for publication, for sharing, there's high expectations. And of course, in order to make this, to pull it off, it has to be structured. I think I've shared this before. I just wanted to reiterate it. And here's the link to be able to get more information about this if you have perhaps forgotten. So we remember that this is a process because writing is a recursive process, and you are working through the process of collecting through reading, through viewing, through learning information. You develop your drafts, you develop your ideas, and then you write your draft, and then you revise your ideas. Editing gets closer to publishing when you're cleaning it up and making corrections that are more mechanical. And then at the end, you reflect on what did I do? How well did it go? Do I want to keep this piece? Do I want to set a new writing goal? Or do I want to start a new piece? So you can see all these many arrows take you in and out of the writing process because it's not, although it's written in a line, we go in and out of these different stages. Every single one of those words is a part of the stages of the writing process that we know that professional writers go through, and we want to usher children through at various stages in our writing instruction, whether you use a workshop approach or you're just working on a piece-by-piece approach. So again, think of it as a giant circle. The workshop model has an opening. The opening is an introduction, get kids excited, hook them, and teach them a mini lesson. Mini is short. It's not a 45-minute lesson. Now, that's not to say that we don't have 45-minute lessons. Kindergartners are going to have a hard time sitting for 45 minutes without being able to do something else. But then that lesson focuses what is going to happen during the workshop period. So if we're going, like I did something with Saturdays and Tea Cakes, and we worked specifically on voice, and I think I talked about elaboration and using sound devices. Those were specific skills that were used in reference to that mentor text that you used to revise a piece of writing that you were working on. That moves into the work period where kids get to go write. They're working on an old piece, a new piece, working on the assignment that you've just given, maybe working with a small group, maybe conferring with another partner, and you, the teacher, are working with the kids as well at this teacher's table, conferring with them on their pieces of writing, and it could very much be even their writing. Sometimes you have to alternate days. Today we're focusing on writing, maybe we're working on reading the next day, and then you bring that workshop to a close and you probably have a share out or maybe some concluding statements. So you have an opening, a work period, and a close. That is the workshop model. So how to write a plan for independent writing time. First of all, you have to think about what do you want them to know and do. So you have to think about what is your mini lesson going to be. When I read Saturdays and Tea Cakes, my mini lesson was on sound devices, where I talked about how the bicycle pedaled. There was repetition. Screech when it came rumbling through the pebbles when the bikes came to a screeching halt, or it went swoosh around the corner. Those are sound devices, and those were specific elaboration techniques that the author brought to that particular text. So we had a lesson just on finding those devices, but I used authentic literature to help you see how authors do this in real literature, and it makes it more vivid and authentic to the reader. And often more interesting. So we also are going to think about the writing process and where in the process the students are and where they're going to be focusing. Are you going to be focusing on the revision? I was asking you to focus on revision after you did the initial writing part when you did your first drafts. And then you ended up publishing it to your blog. So then what are you going to do with that time? How are you going to fill the time in that workshop? What are kids going to be doing? What's the structure of your workshop? You're going to plan that time wisely. And then you're going to share that plan with students. Let me see what the fine print says. This is, I think, remember, this is by Stacy Shubitz, and she is one of the authors of this. So it's just a way to think about how you're going to plan that independent writing time, because you do have to have a plan for yourself and you have to have a plan for the students, but it all centers around the driving force of that mini lesson, which takes us to lesson planning. So the components of the writing workshop from the perspective of the writing experts is, again, what I just described. You've got a mini lesson, probably 10 minutes, 15, sometimes 20. It really depends on you and your teaching style and what your kids can sustain. You're going to have a larger chunk, which is your independent writing time. You might need to do what we call catch and release. Kids are working, but you're monitoring, you're adjusting, you're seeing that maybe they need a new word of advice. Maybe something's not going according to plan. You need to pull them back in, give them a quick, maybe it's a brain break. Maybe you need to refocus them. So you might have a mid-workshop interruption, just about 5 minutes. Then you send them back into writing time. Maybe do a quick reteach. Boys and girls, I noticed that people are forgetting to use their mentor texts to go back and find some of those vivid words that they want to be able to use in their writing. And so you reteach really quickly to refocus students back on the work. And then they share maybe a sample of their writing at the end, okay? So the writer's workshop textbooks, pages 74 through 78, take you through four different areas. So the mini lesson format is really important, and it's really very predictable. You're going to see 1,000 different, I exaggerate, but you're going to see many different formats for writing a lesson plan. I have incorporated all of these into something that we're going to use for this particular course. You'll see it again modified when you go and get your jobs or you're working in the schools and such. But it all leads to modeling, teaching a mini lesson or teaching a lesson up front, engaging students by connecting them. You have to make a connection with your students, what they're going to learn, what their prior knowledge, then teaching the actual content of your lesson, which is through modeling and think aloud and mentor texts when it deals with reading and writing instruction. Then the active engagement, where we're working together, maybe through guided instruction, maybe through small group activities where they're actually practicing the work. And then you link it to what it is that they're going to do that is for real purpose for what they're going to be doing in their assignment. So I gave you a really nitty-gritty summary of what those 4 areas are. Please refer to your text because it goes into it in more detail. You'll see this outlined in the lesson plan template that we are about to do together. All right, so here we go. The lesson assumes that you've already read this book, Saturdays and Tea Cakes. I presented this last week, and here's a link if you need a refresher to hear the story. I'm going to stop. Oops, I'm going to keep going. Here we go. Okay, so I believe that I took this video takes you through a lesson plan for this particular thing. I'm going to skip this right now because I recorded this before and I'm not sure exactly everything I said, but I'm pretty sure that it repeats some of the things that I'm saying right now. But it's nice to have another refresher. And then we have the lesson planning tools that I have given you just as a point of reference that you might find. Remember the TEKS guide. So I just wanted to give you, before we go on though, I do want to give you, let me back up. So here, what we have, excuse me, one second. Is that for me? Thank you, sweetie. Okay, my grandson's bringing me some dinner. So here, what do we have? I think I presented this to you before. I teach several classes, so sometimes I forget, but I want you to review this material on planning and teaching mini lessons because I think you will find it. Here it is again, Connect, Teach, Active, Link. It gives you some more specifics about what is involved in planning a lesson and some more resources, okay? You'll find that useful. Here's the second one. Let's see, what's this? Here is an example of the lesson plan that you're going to write. Here's one that's complete. I'm going to review that with you shortly. And then here are the TEKS guide, which is one resource presented by TEA. I believe I presented this to you before, but you're going to find your particular grade level by going to English Language Arts. You're going to pick, okay, let's say you're going to be first grade, search. And then you will see all the TEKS, but you have to be more specific. You're going to go into, now here, this is important, so please focus here. You're going to look at composition, author's purpose and craft, and multiple genre, because these are the 3 areas that are going to overlap with writing instruction. So you're going to have to find your niche within those. Composition is going to be about the writing process and what kinds of what kind of genres, which is going to overlap with multiple genres. This kind of is in between reading genre and writing genre because we write what we read. And so this is these go hand in hand, but the author's purpose and craft is also with composition going to take you into some of the skills that students are going to be doing. So for example, in first grade, they're going to have to work with the author's purpose, maybe writing in first or third person. Let's see what else we can move into. Let's go into composition and see what else they bring up. So you're going to have to look around. So here you're going to move into more specific conventions, like writing. First graders learn how to write with a specific verb tense, or they learn how to write with prepositions or using articles. They learn how to organize and structure their texts and such. These are all they learn capitalization. These are all specific texts, skills that are related to teaching writing for first grade. So you would change your grade level to find something. You're going to be focusing on grade 1, kindergarten 1, 2, or 3 for the lesson plan that you're going to be doing for this particular assignment, okay? Because we're going to stay in those early grades at this point in time. If you have a great love for wanting to do something for 4th or 5th grade, by all means, reach out to me because I would be happy to entertain that idea as well. Okay, so let's move back to, see, I did a lesson on show, don't tell, but I'm not going to show you that yet. I'm going to move ahead because I want to talk a little bit about the 6 traits of writing, and there's a video that I want you to see as well. So I want you to remember that good writing is based on 6 key main ingredients: ideas, organization, voice, word choice, sentence fluency, and conventions. So ideas has to do with bringing in many, many different a diversity of ideas to a piece of writing. Your vocabulary is going to enter into that, but vocabulary is also going to enter into word choice and how students use metaphors or use strong verbs or specific nouns, different types of words to enhance their writing. Organization, of course, has to do with the flow and the organization of the text. If it's a storyline, it's going to have a circular plot structure, or if it's going to be informational text, you're probably going to have one of the expository text structures like cause and effect. What are some of the others where you're going to have to create an argument, etc., for example. Voice is really where you bring a personality into your writing, where you're going to bring in the voice of the author. And is it supposed to be sarcastic? Is it supposed to be persuasive? Is it supposed to be funny? And how does the author do that? Sentence fluency has to do with the length of the sentences. Are they, and how fluid are they? Do you have all long, very fancy sentences, or are the sentences going to be short and long? We always recommend a combination of them. And conventions is your grammar and your the mechanics, the capitalizations, the periods that I'm thinking of the younger kids. So it gets much more sophisticated, of course, as students get older. Vicky Spandell is the one who came up with this idea of the 6 right traits, and many, many different kinds of videos. I'm sorry, I was looking at this right here. I know this is a video. Many types of resources and books have been written on the right traits, and so many lessons have been developed specifically on just teaching one of those areas at length by reading a lot of student literature and developing the capacity for the student to be able to be fluid in these, because then all writing rubrics usually center in some capacity around these. Sometimes they combine them. Even the STAR rubrics that we used to use are centered around these ideas of the 6 traits of good writing. I think this video I will show you in a minute, so I'm going to pass that for now. Here are some books that you can look up on writing lessons and resources for helping teachers to write good lesson plans for writing. So I am offering you some of the names, the very important people, and some of the books or the topics that they focus on. And then, of course, there's this Read, Write, Think website that it gives you. I think I've shown this to you before, where you can get lots of lessons on writing. You just have to dig and look for various different things for your grade level and the topic you want. So you don't have to go this alone. You can use the resources that are out there. Some common misconceptions about teaching writing. I want you to remember that assigning writing is not teaching writing. We as teachers, and you'll see it a lot, we assign, go write this, create this. I want you to write a paper about what you learned about the life cycle of a butterfly. Excuse me, I'm being interrupted. Yes? The cookies sound delicious. I'll come to them in a minute. Okay. Sorry, but my family is cooking cookies and they wanted me to know. When you're 4, that's exciting. Pardon me for the interruption. So I want you to remember that to teach writing, you have to incorporate a mini lesson. You have to model it. You have to show them what it looks like, and you have to write with them. That revision and editing are not the same thing. Revision focuses on ideas and editing focuses on the mechanics. And you must work the ideas in order to be able to edit your writing once you have said what you want to say. Then you clean it up. Writing conferences are not correcting conferences. Writing conferences are where you draw the writer out, where you help them develop their ideas and get to know them as a writer, to lead them to where they are communicating something that is meaningful for their audience. We are not editors, but we are teachers. The goal of a conference is to help students become better writers. That's by Carl Anderson, who is one of the great leaders in teaching, especially young children, the writing conference. Our teachers how to go through the writing conference. Let's see, is there anything else? I think that takes it to the end of this. I tried to keep it short and sweet. So let's get back to what's going on in D2L here. I want you, before I go to these next two things, I want to show you that there is a folder here. I'm not going to compel you to use all of this. I want this to be a bank of resources for you to tap into when you are developing your lesson plan. So here is a video on the right traits that I told you about. So I encourage you, whoops, not that guy. I think we have to get through this. Sorry, skip ad. This is who I want you to see, and I want you to listen to what she tells you about the right traits, because I think you'll find it useful. I'm going to spare you that because I trust that you are going to tap into these resources to help you become a stronger teacher. Here is a resource that I think you will find useful on the six traits so that you can see. I've given you a very surface level overview. So this time I want you to read some ideas about what it means to talk about ideas as a right trait, how to teach them, same thing goes for organization, word choice, sentence fluency conventions, etc., etc. And then they give you some resources that you can tap into so that you can absorb this information in a way that works best for you. I want you to pay attention to understanding what it means to use a mentor text. You cannot, I repeat, you cannot teach writing without a mentor text. I think we covered this in reading 350, but I want to reiterate that here, and I expect to see a writing text, a mentor text as a part of the mini lesson that you are going to teach, that you're about to develop. So here's some tips for writing using mentor text. Here's another video about integrating mentor text within the writing workshop and the writing mini lesson. Again, the same lady. Here's a video on takeaways from a mini lesson so that you get your head wrapped around that. All of this was in the text that we've read. I'm just taking you back there as references because you probably slept since then. And here is an example of a writing mini lesson that I want you to think about. And again, so you can get your head wrapped around how she uses mentor text, how she thinks aloud and draws her readers along or writers along. And here's the 4 components of the writing lesson, a mini lesson, and the fundamentals of the writing workshop. And again, I take you back to the TEACS guide in order to be able to draw your learning standards. Okay, so this is a bank of resources that I think you will find useful and hope you will tap into. And I'm going to close that right there. So please use that. I'm not asking you to do any responses. I just want you to use it as a resource to help you complete this assignment. So let me see what we have here. Here's another bank of resources, lesson planning resources. You've got the Read, Write, Think writing lessons. I showed you that just a second ago. Here's something else that is another resource on writing mini lessons. Let's see. Oh, I'm bad. It was a book. So forget that. Well, you can have it, but I probably should delete that because I doubt you're going to go to the library and read a book on it. And that must have been something I was thinking about for a class and got mixed up. So I apologize for that link. Let's see which this one is. It's probably taking you back to the library again. I probably should. It's another, these are 2 other books that I think you will find useful resources if you wanted to look up some lesson planning ideas. Notice that this one is the Writing Teachers that I referred you to Ralph Fletcher. Here's one of his books. He's written so many books on teaching writing, but embracing choice, voice, purpose, and play. He's all about the writing workshop and making this a fun learning environment. So it's just some resources for you if you want to maybe download them and put them in your bank for when you do get your own classroom. I think you will find these mini lesson task links a lot more useful. So let's look at the lesson plan right now, okay? So here's a sample of it. I'm going to open this up, try to make this nice and big so we can all see this. Okay, so your template's going to look a little bit like this. And you're going to start by, of course, putting your name. You're not working in groups for this particular task. So you're just going to write your name. So you don't need a group number. Now, let me back up. You may go to your group for help, for advice, for feedback, for bouncing ideas off of. I have no problem with any of that, but you are submitting your own individual lesson plan. The mini lesson topic was elaboration. I used the topic of elaboration, which falls under the idea of voice as one of the right traits, okay? And I gave it a name and I called it Show, Don't Tell. This is what I walked you through last week. What's the learning standard? I picked a third grade learning standard, 10D, and it says that the student is expected to describe how the author's use of imagery, literal and figurative language such as simile and sound devices, such as onomatopoeia, achieve specific purposes. Notice I write the entire TEK, the standard, letter D, here, so that we see the way it is written in the learning standards. It comes under the TEK strand of author's purpose and craft. I just showed you how to find those strands in the TEKS guide. You can also find them by going to the TEA website. It's just a much bigger document and it's a little overwhelming. So you use either source, but I need to have the learning standard, the language as it's written, and I need to have the strand that you're drawing from. What's your learning objective? Students will use sound devices in their writing by revising a piece of narrative writing to show and elaborate ideas from the first draft. That's what I asked you to do. You wrote a short paragraph. I didn't ask you to write a long narrative, but I did ask you to use in the revision process, after you wrote your stories of that memorable person or incident, based on the story that was inspired from Saturdays and Tea Cakes, I asked you to go back and to revise for the sound devices. So that's why the focus of the lesson is on revising, because you're going to revise for sound devices as you see it up here, in order to do what? To show and elaborate ideas from your first draft, okay? So what are the materials? We use that book, Saturdays and Tea Cakes by Lester Laminack. And I had an interactive read aloud from, I believe the slideshow that I did with you guys. And typically I would use a writer's notebook because that's where we do a lot of our practicing. You use D2L discussions in this case. And we developed our own little anchor charts. I started one with you. And then we also used your personal narrative, the first draft of your personal narrative. So we have to have a rationale. So remember, those are materials and mentor text. Absolutely. You're going to have to go find a mentor text. And you can do a lot of internet search to find mentor text around a particular craft lesson or strategy or right trait that you want. So this is not hard to find, but you have to do the work. Right traits is the rationale has to do with the right traits. So here's my thinking. You're going to explain why is it important for this lesson to be done? Not because Dr. Slay asked you to do it or for its coursework, but why in the life of a writer or a first grader or second grader would you have to create this lesson? So it says, pre-service teachers have been asking what it is meant by author's craft. And this is true. This is where it came from once upon a time. A term found in our course readings. It's in the TEKS, it's in the course readings. Because author's craft is a strand in the TEKS which focuses on specific writing skills that distinguishes the author's writing voice, teachers need to experience ways to elaborate their own writing so they can demonstrate specific strategies for teaching students how to show what they mean and not tell. Elaboration is an element of the author's craft which supports voice in the 6 traits of writing. So I want you to connect your writing lesson that you're choosing to create to one of the right traits, and I want you to explain why this is important in the life of a writer, of a student writer. It could be that students have been struggling with such and such a skill, and therefore it falls into this right trait because students are going to need to be able to develop a sense of their own voice. And one way to develop voice is to elaborate their writing with various different tools, such as onomatopoeia, for example. So now you're going, and notice this is a narrative style of writing. I'm explaining it. I'm writing it out in a paragraph. I am not bulleting here, okay? I'm really explaining my thinking, and that's what I want you to do in your lesson plan. So here's another example, the central focus or the purpose of the lesson. You're going to need to describe this. So I explain, excuse me, I let the dog out. I'll be right back. Okay, so I explain that this lesson will focus on teaching a show, don't tell strategy for elaborating a first draft of a personal narrative. We will use an interactive read aloud to help students explore how the author's use of specific language and literary devices to help the reader visualize while reading or listening to the story being read aloud. While listening to the read aloud, students will take notes of descriptive language while listening to the story and then determine how the author helped readers see, hear, and feel while reading. Students will use the author's craft of using onomatopoeia and sound devices to revise and elaborate their own personal narratives. So now I've just explained why this is, I gave you a rationale for this here, focused on the right traits. Now I'm going to give you a focus, or you're going to give me a focus for the specific lesson around why this is important and what the purpose of the specific lesson. I want to get in your head. I want to understand what you were thinking when you developed this lesson and why this is valuable and important and relevant to students. Now, all of that is the background. It's like setting the foundation for your lesson plan. Granted, this is more than we do when we are classroom teachers, because most teachers don't have the time to do this. And they also write many different lesson plans, not just one for one particular subject, really depending on what they are teaching, but your students. So we have to train you in the mindset, the habit of mind of becoming a teacher and what goes into developing lessons. So chances are you're doing a lot of this kind of extended development of your thinking of lesson planning, because teachers go through a bazillion decisions when they're writing lesson plans. And so these are examples of the kind of thinking you're going to have to go into. It may very well be some of the thinking that you're going to have with your colleagues when you're working in what they call planning meetings or PLC, okay? So now you're moving into that lesson structured part. It's the mini lesson. So you're going to start, remember I focused on those 4 areas. So here's the connection. And here's some stems that you're going to use to help you develop your line of thinking. This is where you're going to activate background knowledge, which is activating schema. It's probably going to be about 1 to 2 minutes. So you might want to plan how long you think it's going to take to do this, because I want you to visualize yourself doing this lesson. This is where you're going to hook the reader and the writer, and I want you to actually do these steps that I'm going to bold, okay? So this is what I would say if I were teaching the lesson. I would say, yesterday, here's the prompt. Yesterday, we read Saturdays and Tea Cakes by Lester Laminack. The author used different literary devices for us to use our senses to visualize his story. Rather than just tell the story, he showed us what it was like for a little boy to spend Saturdays with his grandmother by using descriptive language. One of his strategies to make the story more visual, interesting, and entertaining was to use onomatopoeia or sound devices. And then the teacher will set a purpose for reading. So first you hook them By telling them that, then you set a purpose. So now you're going to move on to telling students what they're going to do today. Today, we are going to reread parts of the book to identify those sound devices and to determine how it helps us to understand the story better. So your lesson plan is narrative style. You are writing it out like you would be actually delivering it. This is a very gigantic rehearsal, but I need you to think it through to this level and depth. Okay, the next step is that was the connecting step of it. Now you're going to actually do the teaching. So you might use some of these different stems to help you think it through. Notice this is the category of explicit instruction. It would take you approximately 3 to 6 minutes to do this in front of the kids if you were doing this, for example. So here's step number 3. So you would tell students, so listen for sound devices while I read aloud. Take note of what you hear in your writer's notebook. I will show you how the author uses sound devices in the story. So this is you, the teacher, thinking out loud in front of the kids. Number 4, you would tell them, in step number 4, you're going to read aloud Saturdays and Tea Cakes while stopping to identify examples of sound devices and marking them in a T chart on an anchor chart. We did that. Notice in this mini lesson, we are rereading the book that we read the day before. So I assumed that we had read the book when I gave you that the last time, because we're working fast and furious, you're adults, and this is all online. But with children, we would look at a slower pace. So next, we're going to go to step number 5. So we would say, let's talk about why these sound devices are important. The teacher then will review the list of sound devices on the anchor chart while discussing their impact on the reader's experience. We kind of did that in our mini lesson last time. And then number 6, you would say, now I want to show you how I use these sound devices to revise my own writing. And then you use a think aloud strategy and you model in front of the students how you would change pieces of your text to give you something that you wrote and change it with a sound device. So these are the different steps in the explicit instruction section. Then you move into the third section, which is active engagement. So in some places you will hear about I do, we do, you do. So this first part was the I do part. This is going to go into the active engagement, which is going to be the we do part. We've just, up to now, it's been the I do. Now it's the we do. Now this is that gradual release of responsibility. It starts with the teacher. It moves into students working through guided practice with the teacher in small groups in various different formats. That's why we call it the guided practice stage. And here's some more language to help you get started. So now it's time for you to try it out on your own, okay? So number 1, reread your own writing. Think about where you might be able to describe using onomatopoeia, dialogue, or repetition. Remember, we found those 3 categories in our anchor chart last week. So next, you're going to say, then insert and revise the writing and repost it in D2L for your group members to see. This is exactly what you guys did. If you have trouble reading writing to a group member or partner, to ask for feedback. Maybe someone else can see an opportunity to show rather than tell using sound devices. This is where you get students to peer confer. Students will identify at least 3 areas in their first draft of their narrative writing they created last week to revise and share with their small groups. Then they will post the original sentence or passage and revise the sentences in the D2L, posted in the D2L discussion. So I am showing you how I developed this assignment for adults using the strategies we use with adults and children as I modeled this process for you. The very last section is the link section. So I think this is where you're going to take it to the you do, where you get them to be a little bit more independent and show their stuff, maybe in that large workshop section of the model that I described for you earlier. So this is where you prepare students for independent practice. So here it is. The language is to remember the strategy can be used today, or you want this to make this relevant and authentic to the learner. So remember that using onomatopoeia, repetition, and dialogue helps the reader visualize your story. Maybe even make it more fun and interesting to read and listen to aloud. Use the strategy in your writing to help you show, not tell, as you elaborate or describe your ideas with more detail. Remember, I want to read this lesson plan fluidly as though I am in your head and with you along the way, and you're telling a story of your lesson plan, okay? So, and it's a step-by-step process of how you're going to go through this and the thinking that help you arrive at how you develop this lesson plan. So now they move into the independent practice, and this is all during independent practice, you're also conferring or peer conferencing or teacher-student conferencing. So now confer with your group members to get feedback or simply read your writing. That's what you guys did or were supposed to do. In this online course, we will read each other's writing in our small groups. If you need feedback, ask for it. If something you like, make a comment. If you would like to offer a suggestion, post the idea for your writer. After conferring in their small groups, students will complete revising their personal narrative using the show don't tell elaboration strategy on their own, and they will highlight with color where the sound devices enhance their writing. And then you have a share time where your share time ended up becoming your publishing time because we didn't have a proper formal writing workshop where we were all together in order to be able to share. Actually, your sharing could also be considered what you posted in your D2L discussions. So, and this would be considered an informal assessment because it's not the final grade. So teacher will do a whip around. That's a strategy I use where everybody in the classroom at the end of shares a sentence or something that they revised. In an online class, this will be found in the D2L discussions. So you also have to provide a sample of what you want students to do to show that you are writing along with them. So here's an example of the sample that I included for this writing lesson. So when I was a little girl, I used to visit my grandparents, aunts, and uncles in Mexico every summer. My mother worked, so I usually traveled alone, and my Uncle Johnny would come pick me up at the airport. He always greeted me with arms wide open and big hugs. I remember Uncle Johnny was a funny man. He loved to listen to music in his studio and tease me. Once at breakfast, I asked him if I could have some more orange juice to drink. He teased me by filling my glass up a little kept having to ask for more juice. Well, he thought it was funny. I thought it was funny for a little while, and I usually ended up getting very frustrated. Then finally, he'd give up and fill my glass to the top. So one of the things is that here's an example of an anchor chart. So what do I hear? What does the text say? And here were some examples of the anchor chart that we developed from that particular book. So there was my first draft. Here's the anchor chart of all the different examples from that particular book. And then that led us to understand that there's different types of onomatopoeia or what shall we call elaboration. For example, repetition or dialogue or onomatopoeia. And so I used any one of those samples because I showed students what that looks like in authentic writing. And we discussed how it works and enhances the text. So here is how I revised my writing. And I highlighted it in the red. When I was a little girl, I used to visit my grandparents, aunts and uncles in Mexico every summer, and it stays the same. But then I changed and added some dialogue. He always greeted me with arms wide open and bug hugs. Ay, Laurita, ven aquí, mi linda. He'd boom across the waiting room loud enough for everyone in the airport to hear. So I now expanded my text and it's a little bit more vibrant because I do remember hearing his voice and he really was that vibrant of a man. So I included his words. In this case, they were in Spanish. And then I added some other elaboration, which includes more dialogue here where I had the same thing where it says once at breakfast, I asked him if he could have some more orange juice. So I added, well, what does that sound like? I told you I asked, but what did it sound like? So I added, please, Uncle Johnny, can I have a bit more orange juice? I begged. I had to use a strong verb there. And then he would tease me. And here's what it looked like and sounded like when he teased me. So I added this and then he clunked. There's that's a sound device. The glass of pitcher back on the table. Please, can I have some more? I pleaded again in a whiny voice. Oh, sure, he replied, and once more he dripped only a few drops of juice into my glass. So this was elaborating and expanding on this way that he used to tease me. And then it went and talked about same thing that I had, but then finally I ended up when finally it's glug, 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 glug. He gave up and filled my glass to the top. So I used the sound device to hear that orange juice glugging out of the pitcher into my glass. So that's just a sampling of we taking a piece of original writing through the process of modeling and mentoring using a mentor text, a way to elaborate a piece of writing, showing children specific strategies on how to do it, what it looks like, what tools they can use to apply to their own writing, and then a sample of what that looks like when you take them to the end product. And we didn't write a huge narrative, we just did a small paragraph, as I asked you guys to do in your discussions. And then, of course, you expanded that into your final blog post. So that is an example of the lesson plan that I want you to do. Here is an example of the lesson plan template. It's blank. So I've got all the categories and all the main areas that I want you to include. Let's see what I wrote down here. Link or post resources or ancillary materials you use to create the lesson. That means, where did you get your ideas? What resources are you going to use? What will you bring to the lesson, just like I did, that will support you in teaching it and support the students in executing their lesson? You do not need to do this because this is for another facet of the of this lesson activity that I've done with other classes. You are not doing a YouTube video. I'm going to take that off. There we go. You don't have to have a video for anything. In past, this has been something that it's been revised for this particular course in the way that the PBA is being written. So I hope that that was a clear and specific demonstration of what you are going to do for your lesson plan assignment. There will be, I have to open this up, but you will see that there is, where did it go? Oh, a writing lesson plan assignment. You will post your lesson plan with as much detail and as thoroughly as it's going to be several pages long by the time you get done, because I want to understand your thinking and it needs to be specific and clear. Remember, you are doing it around, you're going to pick one of the right traits to focus your writing. Then you're going to specifically focus on a specific aspect of the writing trait. Gave you resources to help you figure out, well, what are the right traits and how am I going to zoom in on that? If anywhere along this way you have questions and you don't know how to do that, or you need for me to talk you through the process of figuring out how to narrow your focus, you can do that. You may pick grades K1, 2, or 3, your choice. You pick the grade level. You pick your right trait that you want to work on. Maybe it's something that's related to things you've been seeing in the classroom. Maybe it's, I haven't assigned all of this and told you this group is doing this student's doing that, but I'm giving you full autonomy to pick something that meets your passion and your and what you're observing in the classrooms, or what you have seen, or maybe something that you want to work on more as your own, in your own writing. And so you're going to decide which writing trait would focus on that, because that's how you would be evaluated in the end. But then you have to find the TEAC, the learning standard that fits the bill for that particular grade level. And you're going to develop a full lesson plan for that and submit that for this week's assignment. Okay, so this will be due on December. Let's go back and look at the calendar again. This is going to be due after Thanksgiving. So I think it's going to be December 6th is when I would like, yes, exactly. This will be due on December 6th because that is the next Tuesday. So I'm trying to give you plenty of time to develop this lesson plan. If you have any questions along the way in December 6th, or in that week of December 6th, it's the week after Thanksgiving, when we come, next week I will post one more set of activities, which is going to be your blog post having to do with equity and working with diverse populations. So you will have something in there that you're going to do for blog post number 4 before we go into finals. And that will take us to the end of the course. So enjoy. I hope this makes sense. And we will be putting all of our pieces of that's one more thing, sorry. You're going to then take all the 4 different components of your of the PBA and putting it together for one particular submission into D2L at the end. I learned afterwards that we do not have to load this into TK20. So let me double check to see if we have to put it together, because you've been doing all the parts. Remember, I told you I was breaking it apart. This week is lesson planning. I wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving, and let me know how I can help you through this lesson planning template process. And I'm going to sign off now. I have to get back to our link so I can find a window to sign us off. And thank you for attending to this video. Good night for now.